Everyone, and welcome to a special meeting of the Ojai Unified School District's School Board. It is Wednesday, October 7th, and I invite you all to join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here and for agreeing to a special meeting so we can have a discussion around this important topic. I don't believe there are any emergency modifications to the agenda, so barring none, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jane and Kevin. All in favor? Kevin?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Thane?
Aye.
And Shelley, aye. So that passes unanimously. We have a few public comments, and I believe Tiffany is going to read those.
Well, the first we have is from Kelsey Zimmerman regarding agenda item 3.1, reopening. I would like to submit a public comment in regards to the reopening of Nordhoff High School. I'm in favor of Nordhoff High School returning to a schedule that includes kids returning for the classes or components of classes that our students are struggling the most with on Zoom. For example, IEPs, tutoring, sports, labs for sciences, dance, ceramics, auto, video production, arts, clubs, maybe students that are struggling and need in-person, etc. So using this time to prioritize and make the classes and students that need it most will have the opportunity to come back. It would be great, also be great to allow the students to come onto campus in groups to meet their teachers and welcome them to campus, especially the freshmen that are new to the school. I think the hybrid 2 days on schedule will disrupt some of the classes that are working well on Zoom because the semester block schedule and the amount of content that needs to be covered. I believe cutting out 2 days a week of lectures will significantly impact the amount of material they have to cover and learn, especially the honors and advanced classes. The year's materials need to be completed by January 22nd. With the Thanksgiving week break and the winter break thrown in there, the full return to campus on those days already will be minimal for our students before they leave and come back from break. There was also a concern for how many people would be traveling during Thanksgiving and the winter holidays that could impact exposure. Originally, there was a return plan that had them going back to distance learning during Thanksgiving break through the return in January. I believe this could give us a better chance to keep sports, performing arts, electives, and extracurricular activities going because of less exposure to different sets of kids in the classroom. These extras are everything to our kids at Nordhoff, and I think we will see some positive mental health attributes return if they're able to do these in addition to their distance learning. Thank you for your time and everyone's hard work on trying to return our kids to campus safely. The next 3 comments are from Darius Lang. Good evening. Last board meeting, there was 0 public comment. Why is it that stakeholders are not supplied with a meeting ID to participate and offer public commentary? Santa Barbara and many other publicly funded agencies facilitate live links. What is different at OUSD? Last meeting, an expectation was set for the delivery of working Chromebooks to support Zoom classes. After the laptops are received, how long will it take to deploy? How many laptops are back order? How many students have laptops that do not work well with Zoom? Ojai Middle School is using a block system of 120 minutes for core courses like math. The expectation is that a year of math will be condensed into 1 semester. Of the 120 minutes, how many minutes are designated to direct instruction? Is the PACE goal of completing 2 semesters of instruction in 1 semester on track? How is this being measured? And I would actually be happy to email Mr. Lang with answers to these questions. The next one is from Rachel Tank. Actually, the next 2 are from Rachel Tank. Has Ojai School District applied for a waiver for on-campus student learning? If not, what are the factors the district is basing upon applying for waiver? Please include all factors, for example, number of COVID cases, teacher union conflicts, equipment, resources, etc. If waiver is granted, will teachers be willing to return to in-person student teaching? If not, what is the long-term, i.e. within 3 to 6 months solution so that children can return to school, i.e. will district hire new teachers, have teachers Zoom at home, and students attend school on campus? Next comment, what factors have been included in students' curriculum to incorporate applied learning? This semester is our first year attending the Ojai Public School District, and most of the curriculum so far in 2nd and 6th grade has been contractual based learning, with applied learning students participating in the same grade at different academic levels can still perform at their highest levels of achievement, so long as there is a rubric measure. Applied learning fosters creativity, learning in different contexts, application of lessons in real life situations, and acknowledges and may provide a deeper comprehension of the lesson topic. And then finally, Leah Larson, will there be any options for those who are not comfortable allowing their child to return to in-person school at Matilaha Middle School, and who would like to continue distance learning rather than independent homeschool for the remaining of the 2021 school year? Can a new survey be taken on how families feel about the current distance learning program and vote on what they are comfortable proceeding with? For example, distance learning or hybrid. That is it for public comment.
All right, thank you. We move to employee union comments. So first we will
Can I
start.
This isn't like a topic, but I just was thinking in terms of public comments, since this is all new. You know, when we're in person and there's a public comment, there's a 3-minute limit. And maybe in the future, we discuss how we do that if these are just public comments that are typed, if we have a word limit or something like that. So I'll bring that up next week as a topic, but I did just think of it, so.
All right, thank you. We move to our union presidents. We will begin with our California School Employee Association, CSEA President, Chuck Crawford. Welcome, Chuck.
Good evening, everybody. I had trouble logging in this morning or this afternoon, but I'm here, and I thank you all for being here. I want to start with the word respect. I see a lot of it in this district, and it starts right there with you, the board, and I want to acknowledge the responsibilities that you've taken on and engaged so well. Kevin Ruff with his visiting in the summer school session when we try to address this newly and with respect to the families and meet the needs of the community. Just the community needs to know what kind of efforts are taking place in the district. And I want to just put that out there, is that respect is where we all have to start from, because people really don't understand the dynamic of what's taking place, regardless of what position they're in. And one of the things that we as CSEA, we cherish the relationship we've had here with Ojai for the years. People don't often understand that. I struggle with the public comments that we saw earlier this year, or earlier this time, with the employees, single parents, and child care service and that. And people don't understand the dynamic of what's taking place. This isn't just 3 minutes of conversation. There's a lot going on. And I want to thank everybody for that, all the classified employees, the teachers, and all the board here. There is a concern that sticks out to me, and I think it's already being addressed, but I still want to say it for those families that may be concerned, because I'm hearing it from our employees. And that is about the custodial services, because you can't fake it. And I don't think we're faking it. The conversations have different answers, just like we see on the national, state, and different levels. I have a great respect for what's happening here in the district. It's not being communicated just how much is taking place. But I do want to acknowledge, because there have been some changes, as we've seen over the years with budget cuts and 6-hour elementary school custodians. And this whole COVID thing looks different. And we've already had the discussion about sanitation versus cleaning, which are two different issues, just based on timelines. But I would encourage people to have the confidence for what is taking place in this district and to go forward. And the classified employees have expressed concern. And I think the communication, which I as president of this chapter have pretty much been quiet, for the respect that HR has done a tremendous job of trying to accommodate employees in the district. And Tiffany, I just thank you for your human approach to all this, because ultimately that's what we're dealing with as humans. So that's the big concern we have at CSEA that I've heard repeatedly, is the confidence. And the one way it was presented to me was the September 15th, the September 21st, the September 26th. And we've already agreed about the 2-week notice, which Tiffany's letter yesterday pretty well explained that out there from her point of view. And I know it's up before the board right now, and I thank you for that. And I thank you for this meeting, for those watching, that there is a clarity, because people are making decisions and they don't feel confident based on the information. And the custodial one was the biggest thing I've seen. And like I say, I think that the district's already addressing that. And so I just want to say thank you with that. And with all due respect, I'm done for tonight.
Thanks, Chuck.
Wow,
Thank
3
you.
minutes, did I make it?
Thank you, Chuck. And we now welcome our OFT President, Angie Janassi.
Hi, everyone. Gosh, where do I start? I think that the idea of reopening and returning to school, I think it has brought, like, I think I've said this before, two sides of the spectrum for our membership. There's one side, one part of all of us that it feels.
Is anyone else having trouble hearing Angie?
Oh,
No.
you having trouble?
Yeah,
Jane?
you're really muted.
Let me try again. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but it's
Better?
a little muted. Now it's better.
Okay. Should
Perfect.
I start over?
No, we heard you.
Okay, I can start over. Okay. So what I was saying, is I got to take this off though. It's super loud on my end, so I'm just going to talk from here. So what I was saying was that for our membership, I think returning to school creates two different things. One is this great joy and excitement about seeing our students and having children on campus, teaching them in person. There's such excitement about that. And then on the other end, there's fear and trepidation about what it means and how we're going to go about this. And Chuck, I think you hit it right on the nail on the head, in that for us, for a lot of teachers, there's such fear about whether things will be clean enough or sanitized enough. And I think that's just for everybody. Have I put enough hand sanitizer on my hands when I leave the grocery store? Have I done everything correctly? Will everything be done right? So I think that for our membership, there's both the excitement about the possibility of returning, and then there's the fear. But I would like to say that one of the things that I can see as a union president that's very different than other places that I'm seeing out there, because I'm in connection with a lot of presidents around the state. And one of the things that happens in a lot of districts, and I might have said this before, is that what happens to presidents often is the decisions are made, and then they say, okay, now let's negotiate. And so the decisions are made by the administration, and then they say, okay, now you will negotiate with the union presidents and their negotiating team. And the difference here is that Tiffany and Cheryl have created the Return to Work Committee, or Return to School Committee, sorry. And we are having the conversation about how are we going to do this? What will it look like? And even this week, one of the things I expressed was we need an opportunity to express our concerns and fears. And I think we spent more than half of the elementary meeting expressing our fears and concerns. And we may do that at every meeting, because each time we're working through stuff, the new fears come out. So as usual, I am so grateful that we have a relationship with our administration in which we can collaborate and work together on something, especially in this case, that creates so much fear and concern. So thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you for being here, Angie.
Thanks, Angie.
Superintendent's report.
I
I'm skipping
actually, Yes, I would like to skip that since that is primarily the
That's really
return to campus.
right, return to campus. So here we are at return to campus.
All right, thank you. I'm going to flip over and share my screen so that you can see. So I have a few pieces of this to share with you tonight. The first is I'd like to just start with an update of our distance learning survey. If you remember, we did a distance learning survey a couple of weeks ago. We had about a 20% response rate, a little bit higher in elementary and a little bit lower in middle and high school, which is kind of to be expected. So
Is
these,
that on par with other surveys? 20 seems low.
it's a little low, yeah.
Okay.
But it depends on the survey. So these are the results of some of the questions. So the first question was, how is distance learning going for your child? And what you can see is the green are kind of, it's going well. The gray is it's okay. And the blue is it's not going well. It's interesting because at elementary school, we have the highest percentage of not going great at all, which is in the 30%. And it's interesting, we were talking about this with one of our employees who has young children, and he said, you know, we filled this out and we selected not going great at all. And I just wanted to be really clear, it's not about the teachers, it's just that distance learning is hard. Teachers are absolutely doing their best. We appreciate everything that they're doing. They are doing the best they can. We just struggle with distance learning in our family. And so I think that's an important thing to note. We can't necessarily make a correlation between parents saying it's not going great at all and anything that's happening from our teaching staff. It's just, as I said to a group of teachers yesterday in the return to work committee, distance learning generally is not great. At Nordhoff, we see generally a little bit, it's going a little bit better for more students. We have a similar question about how is it going for you as an adult? So for you as a parent, how is it going? And these are pretty similar results. We just wanted to see if there was any big discrepancy between your results as a student, but they're pretty close. The next piece that we asked is, how is the workload going? So is it not enough, just right, or too much? And what we find is that for the most part, it's just right. We have some variation. We have some where it's too much. We are always at the high school working on how can we adjust both the rigorous expectations of our academic program with the amount of work and the time. And there was another question that I didn't put on the survey, or on these results, but it basically said, how much time are you spending? And what we find is that there are definitely some outliers in terms of the average time. So there's an average time, and then there's some students that are taking more time to complete assignments. And so those generally correlate with the workload is too much. But overall, it's about just right. What I think is important to note is that this would likely be the case if we were in person as well, is that we would be having these same kinds of adjustments and struggles and working with the range of students, right? We always know that we have kids who really get it and kids who are struggling and take some more time. And that's why we do differentiated instruction. And that's why we have our PLC work and our questions that relate back to what do we do for students who don't understand and what do we do for students who get it and need to move on. So this is kind of in line with what we need to do, but we are working with staff to present these results so that they can kind of see where we are holistically. We also have a question about, are you planning to return in a hybrid model? And this was non-binding. I just think it's interesting that we have a lot of maybes at the elementary school and a lot of maybes at the middle school. I would say I'll address this a little bit later in the presentation. At this point, we're not anticipating doing another survey. but we will get more granular in asking specific families to identify when they're coming back after we present them with some more information about what the model would look like, because a lot of these maybes will probably depend on what does the schedule look like, what does the model look like. And then finally, we have, how do you feel about the academic screen time? And I have the same model for Matilaha and Nordhoff, which is, was it not enough, just right, or too much? I think it's fascinating that some parents think there's actually not enough screen time. And I actually think at Matilaha, it's fascinating that we had an almost equal number of respondents say it's too much and it's not enough, which seems to happen a lot when we do surveys. We get fairly equal amounts of people with conflicting viewpoints. At Nordhoff, I think that the too much screen time is also probably related to that group that is saying that we have too much work. And then in elementary, instead of breaking it out this way, I actually broke it out by grade level so that we have, is it just too much academic screen time at elementary instead of the not enough, just right? And what we find is that in second and third grade, we need to make some adjustments. So we actually presented this to the teachers a couple of weeks ago, and we've been working on what adjustments can we make by grade level to see if we can adjust maybe some of the programs and some of the curriculum that's going home and how we can make those adjustments. So we've been working with our staff on that.
Tiffany, I'm not following that graphic. Can you help
So
me understand it? Does
this
your child have too much academic screen time? Is this all yeses?
No, so TKK is that 36% of parents said that it was too much. 50% of grades 2 through 3 parents said it was too much, and
Okay.
12%. So our upper grade parents generally felt like it was about right. Our grades 2 through 3 parents felt like it was too much screen time. And so we want to adjust that. In our TKK1, it's interesting because we have the ABC club. And so it's a little bit hard to gauge that. But in our 2 through 3, we need to make some curriculum adjustments. And so we're working on that. So that's the results of our distance learning survey. Yesterday, the Ventura County Public Health announced that Ventura County had moved down into the red tier. If we stay in the red tier for 2 weeks, they announced that schools could reopen on the 21st. And I thought that this data was interesting. This shows in a zip code by zip code graphic where we are in terms of our risk. And so this is the most current data I have. It's a couple of weeks old, but I think it's interesting that for the entire month of September, we did not get higher than the orange category. So even though Ventura County as a whole moved from purple to red, Ojai specifically has not been higher than orange, and we had 1 week in the yellow. So outside of Oak Park and a couple of other districts in the East County, we're generally doing quite well. And I think this is important to know when we look at the overall safety of our return to campus plan, is that we have generally very low rates. We had a little bit of an uptake the last week of September. Also, I think that in Oakview, there have been some cases that have been identified and in care facilities. And so that skews that a little bit.
Is that what we're seeing in that 9.2?
Yeah.
For Oakview.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Oakview looks really good.
Yeah, there were some cases specifically identified in care facilities.
Yeah, I believe it was in the teens for that one facility. So that's really
Right.
going to.
Yeah, so that's why you're seeing
Apparently no one lives in Bell Canyon.
that. Yeah, Oak Park is pretty incredibly low as well, I think.
Yeah.
So moving forward, based on those two pieces of data, the county announcement and then our local data, we have met with staff, looked at the return to campus based on the survey data, we met with our parent advisory committee. We have discussed at length. We also had a survey at Matilaha and a survey at Nordhoff of teachers. And so this is our plan for returning to campus based on all of that data. And that is that at Matilaha and Nordhoff, we will remain in distance learning through the first semester. But as was mentioned in one of the public comments, we will really work on on-campus targeted assistance. And so that looks like small groups coming to campus for a variety of activities that I'll address in a later slide. This could be extended as needed. Right now, though, we would commit through the holidays and through the first semester. And I'll talk about in a moment why we made that decision. But at the high school, it was really important to maintain continuity for our teachers. When we talked about in the return to campus committee, when we talked about changing mid-semester, the hybrid model is going to be different for families and different for teachers. And because we're on the block schedule at both Matilla and Nordhoff, we're concerned about losing instructional time in the middle of the semester, particularly at the high school. So that was a big factor in looking at that. And then at our elementary schools.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question? I didn't think about this before today. Matilla used to be on a trimester. So before this year started, we moved that to a semester. Is that how that? Right, we used to have a trimester that ended right at Thanksgiving and then one that ended in, I think, March.
Right.
And
Cheryl, did we move to trimesters or did we keep it on trimester?
We brought this to the board that we needed to move to semesters just for this year in order to do the block.
Right.
getting that. Thank you.
I thought we had done that, but I wasn't sure if we just talked about it. So for our elementary schools, we would move to a hybrid with the AB schedule beginning on November 2nd. Even though we are technically allowed to return in the third week of October, as both Chuck and Angie mentioned, there are a lot of issues for us to continue to sort through, and you'll see later in this presentation, some of them are quite complicated, and it's just going to take us that long to be able to make sure that we can return safely and have all of our protocols in place, make sure that students are assigned correctly, work with the teachers, work with the technology, all of those things that we need to do to confidently return. So looking at November 2nd, which is in line with when we originally had the plan, we said that we would go on a month-by-month basis and that we would shoot for October 1st. So now we're at November 2nd, and that's maintaining that month-by-month basis that we had originally talked about. And then Chaparral and Summit are modified return to campus in small cohorted pods, and we are still working with a place to grow staff on what this schedule looks like for them.
And it occurs to me that Matilaha and Nordhoff are going to be difficult to create cohorted pods.
I'm going to show you that in just a moment. So here's what's happening.
Tiffany, I just quickly, so I thought at some point we heard that there was some in-person going on at Chaparral. That's not right though, right?
Yeah, that's what this, so they have a modified return to campus. They are return to campus right now, 2 hours a day.
So already, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Summit is also, I mean, they're an independent study program, but they are at Rock Tree Sky in their extension activities in pods on a modified basis as well.
So those two.
How long has that been going on?
Chaparral came back, I believe, 2 weeks ago, potentially, in accordance with the cohort model. They were able to do that, and Rock Tree Sky, I think, for around the same amount of time, and they also have a cohorted model, so they were in line with the regulations and the sizes and all of that kind of stuff.
Just for the audience, the cohort meaning a group of students who stay together, and when they come to campus, they're always the same group together, so they're not mixing and matching.
Right. So I'm going to show you in just a moment what that looks like. So here's part of our issue in our secondary program. So if you can just for a moment imagine, this is, what do we call it today? The least worst, best case solution or something like that. This is the best we could hope for. So let's say that we have students who are in first period math, and there's one student who has a confirmed COVID exposure. Let's say they're not even sick, but a confirmed COVID exposure. According to the protocol, we would quarantine all 16 students in that class. And I'm saying 16 because in an AB model, we would bring back half of the students who are choosing to return. So let's say that that's 16. then those students go to, let's say 8 go to period 1 English with one teacher and 8 go to period 2 English with, period 2 English and period 2 English with a different teacher. So now all the students that they have been with would also be quarantined. And then they go from there into 3 different electives, and they would potentially be quarantined if we found out that we had a confirmed exposure and that student moved through just the student in the first block. So we could be looking at quarantining 96 students until they either get a test result or I'll show you in a later slide what the flow chart looks like, and 6 teachers. And the 6 teachers becomes problematic because then those 6 teachers, when we can't have their kids on campus the next day because we don't have enough substitutes. As it is right now, we don't have enough substitutes. But if we were to come back in person at the middle and high school, we just would not have enough people if we had to quarantine like this. So at this point, given where we are, it doesn't make sense for us to try and do this. We can't meet these requirements, and we can't quarantine this many students. So in different tiers, it might look different. The flow chart of what happens with the confirmed exposure might look different. But at this point, it's really difficult to imagine being able to do this and still function in school. We would basically have to shut the school down pretty quickly.
And that's just over an exposure, not an actual positive case.
Right. And these students, this is the best case scenario, but really these students are not just going to 2 English classes, they're going to more English classes, and they're going to more electives. So it just gets bigger from here. So what can we do instead? We are very excited to see students on campus. We are concerned about the way that particular model looks. And so we are committed to working to bring back small groups of students. We are bringing back our special education SDC students already next week, potentially on Monday. We're working with English learners already. We have been inviting students who are not successful in distance learning to come to campus, either through tutoring or at the middle school. We have something we've been piloting called the Scholars Club. In the Scholars Club, we call every student who's not successful and invite them to come for be in a pod in the Scholars Club, which is, we are very grateful to the Lapines and Paul Harkins, who worked for us last year, for running those Scholars Clubs. So those students have a certificated teacher to support them during the day. We have athletes back on campus for some of our programs, depending on if they were able to meet the pod and cohort requirements successfully. Some clubs are meeting on campus, depending on their size. And then we're currently exploring how to safely bring back other groups for optional experiences, including seniors and freshmen, tutoring, and then lab classes. And lab is a very broad class. In fact, I believe we started ceramics in person this week. In small groups. And so we're working really closely to make sure that we can do so safely. My personal goal would be that every student who wants to return to campus has an opportunity to do so through one of these models before the end of the semester. So if you are missing that socialization, that we find some method and mechanism for you to come to campus in a small group that's safe, that doesn't have the same cohorting issues that I showed you on the last slide.
Tiffany, is there any way for kids to know like which clubs, for example, are meeting? I wasn't aware that any clubs were meeting. That sounds exciting.
I think it depends on if they're in the club. I know we just started a new esports program. I think they have to meet in person because they're building the computers. So I can't imagine that you can do that through distance learning, but I'm not sure when they'll be coming back to meet in person. So I also think that there is a club, and I'm forgetting their name, that with like 6 seniors, they met a couple of weeks ago with Mr. Munson. So I think it depends on the club. And students who are in that club or have signed up for that club would get those notifications from the advisor.
Tiffany, I'm trying to wrap my head around exposure issues with these small groups. if they're coming on campus every day, but in small groups, these aren't necessarily going to be cohorted groups, right? I mean, you could be an athlete and in a club at the same time.
Right. So we are meeting with Ventura County Public Health tomorrow. There is some conflicting guidance about specifically what is required of cohorts. Every superintendent has a different impression of what is allowable and not allowable in cohorts. And so after tomorrow's meeting, hopefully we'll have some clarity and potentially some documents in writing that tell us what exactly is required for cohorts, and then we can set up the rest of these right now. So right now, our Scholars Club at Matilaha, students aren't really coming on campus for anything else, so we don't have a cohort issue. Our athletes, for the most part, aren't coming on campus for anything else. So right now we're not having cohort issues, but we want to make sure that we're following the guidance as soon as we understand and are clear about what the guidance is.
Tiffany and I, because we have obviously met with them as well and received a lot of information at Weil. And I know one of the things they're saying for secondary is to minimize.
Right.
So it's not just one pod, but you're minimizing how many, so you might have 2, but hopefully you don't have 6.
Right. Right. And that's, I think, what will allow us eventually to come back in the model. But right now, with just all the class, even with 3 classes, we feel like we can't minimize the mixing of students in cohorts. We felt like that was too much, but this is a middle ground for essentially a soft return to campus for students who choose to come. So that is the secondary model. And then in elementary.
Before you move to elementary, can you answer the question potentially from the public comment about, is there an option for Matilaha students to, I'm trying to remember how it was worded, not to stay home, but not necessarily doing independent study? Well, I guess at this point, Matilaha is not going back.
Right.
So it will be pushed until we make that decision in the future.
Right.
Okay.
And then I would like to, there are some, well, I think one of the public comments even said, that the idea of moving to a hybrid for the secondary school makes it harder for those AB days. Right now, those students are getting a lecture, let's say in AP history, 4 days a week, right? But if they go to the hybrid, it would only be 2 days a week. And how do you get all that information?
That's not the case. We just met with our return to campus for secondary, and we are working in a model because we're very concerned about making sure that we have as close to equivalent hours as possible that we would have in a regular school year when we return to a hybrid model. So we're working on some plans for that to make sure one of the things we know that is working right now is having contact 5 days a week. And we know from families and from teachers that is effective and way more effective than in the spring when we didn't require that. And so we're working on a model that would allow us to continue that, particularly at the secondary level, so that we're not losing instructional time while we're on the block period, which would be problematic. So, but we don't have that finalized yet for sharing in this particular meeting, but we will as we get a little bit closer through the work of that group.
Right. I know my son who's in grad school, they're doing sort of mini lectures that you watch and then your time together in your pods, or it's all online right now, but is more a discussion time than a lecture time. So maybe it looks something like that.
Yeah, when we get a little bit closer, I actually feel like our secondary plan is coming together really nicely. And as soon as we do a little bit more work on it and share it out, I will be excited to share that with you as well.
Thank you.
So in elementary, again, looking at a November 2nd return, there's a lot of things that we have to do. These are some of the things that we're working on right now. So we're hosting a presentation to staff on Friday, October 9th with all of the Ventura County public health nurses. So there are some health questions that come to me or to other administrators, and we are not the public health experts, so we want to make sure that our staff has an opportunity to ask the public health experts if they have specific questions around what does this look like, rates of infection, what are the rates of catching this from things like how important is sanitization in a classroom? Is that the most important thing? Is it more, versus masks versus social distancing versus washing hands? What do we need to be doing, and what are the most important things? So those are all things that will be brought up in this presentation from the Ventura County Public Health Nurses. We are holding weekly return to campus committee meetings. We had elementary yesterday and secondary today. We are revisiting the elementary schedule to ensure time for serving both on-campus students and students who elect to remain in distance learning. And I would say this is very tricky. It gets complicated very quickly when you think about there are only so many hours in a day, and we have mandatory lunchtime for teachers and things like that. And in the time that we have during a day, we want to make sure that teachers can really work with the students who are in person. We want to make sure that we're serving our distance learning students who remain at home. And then we also have our homeschool students. And the difference, again, just as a reminder, between distance learning and homeschool is that our homeschool families have opted not to have mandatory Zooms. But our distance learning right now has mandatory Zooms. So we have kind of three groups of students. And so our group is working really diligently through how can we serve these students in a way that works best for them, given the time that we have available from teachers. And it is a tricky issue for sure. So we have a lot of work to do on that still, and we're not ready to share out any of that at this time, but we are working on it. We are also creating custodial schedules to ensure daily cleaning and sanitization of classrooms, restrooms, playground equipment, etc. I saw a draft, I think today, of a daily schedule for both an AM and a PM custodian, and saying this is what we would expect to be done every day, so that it's very clear to the staff, to all staff, what should be happening when, and we make sure that everyone is accountable for that, and that we are doing what we say we're going to do. We're also working to ensure adequate personal protective equipment for all sites and students, and I'll show you in a later slide what that is. We're removing items from classrooms that can't be cleaned daily. So David Rogers and I last week walked every campus. We met with teachers. We talked about what can stay in classrooms, what should go from classrooms, things like couches that can't be cleaned. And, we're being sensitive to the fact that we have a very strict custodial schedule. So for example, if there's something that like a beanbag chairs came up a lot, our custodian is not responsible for daily cleaning of the beanbag chair. And so we either remove the beanbag chair or for our SDC kiddos who use beanbag chairs, we're buying an individual beanbag chair for each student, as well as a weighted blanket that's used specifically for that student, by that student, and with no other students, so that it doesn't actually need to be wiped down every day because it's not being used by anyone else. So we're working on what is the best solution in each classroom based on the needs of the students in that classroom.
And I'm assuming there's also a plan for nutrition services. I'm thinking about cafeteria lines and how impossible.
Our current plan is for students to go home before lunch, because we cannot properly social distance and supervise students on campus at lunch at this time. So we will likely, and then in the afternoon, that allows us time for our teachers to serve our students who are on distance learning. So it actually creates kind of a natural break that we need anyways to transition to our teachers to their distance learning time.
And will that be get us to the adequate number of instructional minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. So because we can count both synchronous and asynchronous time. So yes. So we're doing that. We're doing site walks and classroom visits, as I mentioned. And then we're really working hard. Cheryl and Janine Murphy are working on developing mental health supports for when students return to campus. We actually have a plan. We're very excited about this, to have community circles when we return, and to use those community circles in each classroom that are run by our MFT interns or Janine or other staff, using those community circles as a way of identifying students who may be struggling, and then being able to provide them with additional mental health support and services. So it's a good way for us to bring students back in a supportive way, and then to really be able to identify where we could do more work with specific students. In general, just as a reminder, these are a continued student support across the board for all students, whether they are remaining on distance learning or they are returning to campus. So we have our mental health services, our parent support groups, we have free meals for families through December 31st. We are working on a tutoring program, a comprehensive tutoring program, but we have some tutoring available at our secondary sites. We're working on elementary sites. We have our Tech Tent Friday, which is seeing, I think at last count, 140 plus families have come to our Tech Tent Friday. So that is being well utilized. We are working continuously on getting bicycles because we're not providing transportation, and we will not be providing transportation when we return to campus at this time, aside from families that have transportation written into their IEPs. We just cannot provide enough. We don't have enough room on our buses given social distancing and other requirements. So at this time, we're not providing transportation unless it's specific to special education families. But in exchange for that, we're working really hard on getting bikes for all students who need them through the Family Fund. That is a little bit hard because I did not know this. You might have known this. There's a national bike shortage. So we can't even get as many bikes as we need to serve students, but we're working really hard. We have some great community partners. We have a new partner in Oakview who's going to help us with refurbishing bikes, which is something that we didn't have the capacity to do. So if we have donated bikes, they will donate the time to make those usable for students. So trying to provide a way for students to get to campus if they don't have transportation. We also have our clothing closet, which we have kind of seasonally, that is running, I think this week, maybe next week. So we're helping our families to stock up on winter clothes because that's coming. And then still continuing on our technology needs with providing phones, family computers if families need them, and hotspots as well.
Tiffany, where would someone bring, for example, a bike, or who would they contact if they were to want to donate bikes?
Linda Jordan would be our contact for bicycles.
Is there a place to bring them, or just to sort of figure it out on a case-by-case basis?
I think we figure it out on a case-by-case basis, but I think right now we also are, I know we're handing bikes out from the Chaparral Auditorium. But it would probably depend on if it needed refurbishing or not and where we would take it at that point.
I had one other question. With respect to the plan for the elementary schools, have there been other elementary schools in the public realm in California who sought waivers and got them and were actually up and running, with which we could compare our plan, and how does our plan comport with those other plans that you've seen, if any?
So I am constantly on social media, and I'm in many principal and teacher groups. And so they're always talking about their plans, and they're always talking about, we just opened in hybrid, or we opened in face-to-face, or we opened in this way. And I'm always reading those and reading through their comments. And so I have, not just from California, but from across the country, been following closely the models that other people have. There's really only a few models to choose from, to be honest. There's not infinite variations. There's so many hours that teachers on campus, and if you have some kids at home and some kids on campus, there's only a couple of ways to really navigate that. So we are working with our teachers on, of those options, which ones will be best for our teachers and our families. But in terms of everything else, in terms of, the return to campus, the safety protocols, all of that is in line with what everyone else is doing.
Well, I was thinking in particular too about the in person ending before lunch, that seems like kind of something that it's kind of insurmountable as a, you know, I don't know how someone could do it differently as if, as you just said, you have partly online and partly in person. It wouldn't seem, there are not enough hours in the day to do it otherwise, it would seem.
Right. We're committed to making sure that our families who remain on distance learning have the best experience possible, and to serving our students who are in person as best as possible. And so trying to really balance the needs of those two really disparate groups of students is the work that we have to do right now.
Tiffany, I'm both encouraged and discouraged by the number of people using Tech Fridays. I'm really grateful that you have set that up so that families can reach out and use it. But I'm wondering if those who are using it are falling through the cracks the rest of the week. Are these families who are having access issues, or is this tech that, you know, I just need you to show me how to use Canvas or that kind of thing?
So we get tickets continuously throughout the day. As I mentioned before, I actually get every single ticket that comes into the help desk, and I kind of can triage. I can send them to send them to tech. I can send them to the sites. They come in about all kinds of different things. And I look at them so that I can kind of see trends. And David will tell you on occasion, I'll say like, wow, we've gotten 4 of these in a row. What's going on with this program? And I'll like text him, and we communicate back and forth. So in general, if you reach out to us, we get back to you. We did find we had a couple of parents who were submitting tickets, but they were actually going to Canvas, not to us. So they were like, I'm never getting a response. And it was because they weren't going to us, they were going to Canvas, and Canvas doesn't know that they were our students. So we don't have that kind of tech support plan with Canvas. So trying to navigate those kinds of things. David, if you might have more information about what the families are coming for. Sometimes we hand out hotspots and then we still need to do some training. We do training when we hand out a hotspot, but sometimes you say like, I got it. And then you walk home and you're like, now where's the password again? Our hotspots are really great, but they're not intuitive around particularly where is the password. It doesn't say password. So you might take it home and then like not know how to use it.
I was going to jump in real quick, Tiffany.
Yes.
Typically what we're doing is we will reach out and try to troubleshoot the issue. And if it's something like my webcam's not working, I'm still in the Zoom session, and I can hear everyone, they just can't see me, we'll say, okay, well, we tried this. Let's meet up on Friday at the tech tent. But we wouldn't wait if it was like, I can't get in at all. We will take steps to either deliver it by hand or meet them at our tech lab with proper masks and social distancing and all that. So we also have signs up during the weeks that guide them straight into our technology team room. So it makes it really easy to get support.
Great. Thank you, David.
So if you need a hotspot, for example, we don't say wait until Friday.
Correct.
We send you immediately, here's how to get a hotspot. Here's where you go to pick it up. Pick it up at your convenience between these hours. So it's a mixture of both. But if your computer needs some kind of physical touching to make it work, Tech Tent Friday is a great place for you to bring it and say the keys fell off or whatever it might be.
Can you update us on the family computers? I know there was a group, you know, I believe those came in, right, Tiffany or David, that the ones we had ordered, and have they been handed out? And
So I was just going to talk to you about, so family computers are something different. Those would be like, my student has a Chromebook, but I need a computer for something. We have some extra computers that have been e-wasted for us that still have some life because we're using laptops now rather than lab computers. So family computers would be like, I need a computer for my family to use beyond just the Chromebook. But the Chromebooks that we ordered came in, and we distributed 4th grade Chromebooks last week, and Matilaha is rolling out their 6th grade Chromebooks tomorrow. And then once those are distributed, if we have students in 7th or 8th grade who Chromebook is broken or they weren't here last year, they'll get theirs. And so we have kind of a scheduled rollout for those. But our 4th grade have been handed out, and Matilaha is on the way.
then there was that group of Chromebooks that were a little bit older that weren't working well on Zoom, those have been replaced as well, or are there still families who are struggling?
Those are still out there as we are able to bring back Chromebooks. So if we have older Chromebooks that have been handed out, we try and replace them with newer ones as we're able to. But we definitely do not have brand new Chromebooks for every student in the district at this point. So we still will have some families that have older ones. If they're struggling, they can reach out to us and we can try and switch those out. We had new teacher computers. And so with our new teacher computers, we were able to collect some of our Chromebooks back from teachers that we've been redistributing to families as well.
Tiffany, just something occurs to me, if with respect to, like, I think the sixth graders are supposed to get new ones, right? New Chromebooks.
Yeah, they get new ones tomorrow.
If families are able, for example, ours to, find a computer that's working great, would that be possible for the kid not to get these Chromebooks and then have extra ones for other parts of the district?
So we would prefer not, because you keep that Chromebook for 5 years. And so we would, it's your Chromebook. And if we give it away, then if you need it in the future, that's hard. We're also working on some software that would allow teachers to monitor kids' screens. And that will only work on district computers. So if we start having grade levels that have a mix of personal and district devices, that becomes problematic. So the teacher could, for example, in 6th grade, see everyone's screen except for yours. And so we're really in 4th through 8th grade, actually 4th through 9th grade, because last year's 8th graders went to Nordhoff. 4th through 9th grade, we're really trying to keep our district devices in use, so that we can, when we have this software, we'll be able to utilize it in all of those grades. The other grades, it'll be harder because we can't use it on your own personal computer.
And I would imagine that once we are back in school, even full-time next fall, that there'll be work on the Chromebook in the classroom.
Right. Part of our
computer won't be there. It'll be at home with me.
right. Part of our rolling out the one-to-one devices is absolutely that becomes integrated in kind of the way we operate. And then we were just talking about this today in our secondary group about how, you may have a device at home, but that doesn't mean your parent's going to let you bring their laptop to school. So, how do we work on that for the grades that don't have one-to-one devices? Okay, so additional work that's in progress. We are carefully looking at the requirements for COVID testing of staff. There's some COVID monitoring requirements that we are getting clarification on and working to see how we can possibly implement that. It's quite expensive to do COVID testing for the number of staff that we have. And so we are working with public health and other districts, also our health insurance company and the city, to come up with a plan for how to meet those requirements. We have not yet determined the specific A and B assignments for the hybrid. And just a little glimpse into this gets complicated again fairly quickly. So we were just talking about, and kind of combining the next bullet, we were just talking about special education services. And, one of our special education teachers was saying, well, could I have these students come on this day when I'm at this school? But we really have committed to try and keep families together on an A or a B cohort model. And so if we start moving the younger students out of their family cohort, but maybe if you don't have older siblings, then maybe we could arrange your cohort, but then families got to choose. This also goes to the same thing as combo classes, right? There was this idea of like, well, we could just have, this many, the first grade kids come on this day and the second grade kids come on this day. But because we've said that parents can either choose or request a specific AB day, or we want to keep them with older siblings, it doesn't allow us to have that purity of, first grade on this day and second grade on that day. So this is incredibly complicated. It seems like it should be simple, but it's not. And this is going to take us quite some time to work through. But we did allow parents earlier to submit a form if they wanted to request a particular A day or B day. We will redistribute that form, and we will be able to make those accommodations as we can, right? But if we have an imbalance, we may not be able to make all of those accommodations. So that's the work that we need to do. Pending the guidance on cohorts, we will determine if we can continue with childcare and the ABC Club for students who are in their not in their live day. We just need to make sure that we can do that in an appropriate cohorting model, and that we have the staff to continue to do that. We are out of human beings at this point. We at some point had lots of staff that were available that we could kind of plug in here and plug in there, and you could do ABC Club or do this work or that work. And we are utilizing everyone that we possibly can in some way or another. So we are out of people, and we are advertising for substitutes and so forth. But you know, the people who want to work in person is a limited subset of the people who in general are looking for jobs. So, and then we also are looking at, as part of this overall model, what is the homeschool option and how can we continue to support our families who chose homeschool? Do they go to distance learning? Do they stay on homeschool? What does that look like? And then how are our homeschool families evenly distributed? Because what happened is, of course, in some classes, we had no one choose the homeschool option. And in some classes, we had 5 families choose the homeschool option. And that's a little bit of additional work for our teachers. And so we don't have an equitable distribution of those families. And so as we move forward, we want to think about how do we continue to serve those families, but also make sure that the additional work on teachers is distributed in a fair way, without also moving students from their classes that they've been in with their teachers that they've been in this school year. So this slide is basically, everything's very complicated, but we're working through it day by day. Basically every minute we're awake, and lots of times in my sleep, actually. The other day I was having a dream that I was giving something about COVID and like some kind of COVID planning in my sleep. And I got up and I said, Tiffany, you don't have to do this. You're sleeping right now. You can think about whatever you want to think about. You don't have to think about planning for COVID. And I went back to bed and I kept planning for COVID. And so this is kind of all consuming, and this is the work right now. So I just want to remind everybody, share with you our safety measures that we have in place. And I would say I got a couple of messages from parents who had some concerns, and anytime that we hear concerns, we work really hard to address them. I think that we have been in a place where we asked everyone to return to campus, but we don't have students on campus. And so we have relaxed a little bit. The adults have relaxed to some degree amongst themselves. And so we are, now that we're preparing to return to campus, we are reminding everyone of the rules and really working on a reinforcement of rules, and these are our safety procedures. So this starts with a daily check-in. All staff check in with a daily symptom checklist and a temperature check. We have a pulse ox at every site. That's additional data. Staff don't have to use it, but they can.
Tiffany, just a quick question on the number one, the check-in with the temperature. Is that a physical temperature or is it attestation?
It's
questionnaire?
It's a physical temperature with it.
Oh, cool. All right. And what is pulse ox?
Pulse oxygen is your pulse oxygen. You stick your finger in the little clamp thing, and then it tells you what your pulse oxygen is. And actually, it's a probably a better indicator of if you had a serious health concern. So you might have heard when the president was in the hospital, there was a lot of reporting on like what was his pulse oxygen. If COVID is in your lungs, you may have a lower pulse oxygen and not know it until you take your pulse ox and it's incredibly low, in which case we would probably recommend that you go to the hospital immediately. So I love to take my pulse ox just to make sure that I'm okay every day. But it's an optional tool for staff to make sure that they have the appropriate oxygen. We
And
have,
use those at the district office. They're cleaned every time too. So
Yes.
you are sticking your finger in there, but there are alcohol wipes there as well.
Mhm. Yes. We have limited the visitors on campus. So if somebody's on campus, they are approved by administration. So for example, we've had some PTOs dropping off things for teachers. Those all go through the office and have to be approved in advance. And all visitors should go through the same exact screening that our staff goes through. So if you come to visit here at the district office, we take your temperature and your pulse ox and you fill out the same symptoms checklist, which potentially we would use if we had to do contact tracing at some point.
So Tiffany, in a previous slide, there was a mention of PPE for staff and students. What exactly are we?
It is coming on the next slide or one of the upcoming.
Sorry, I'll let you get there.
No, that's all right. Any students on campus, we check temperatures. So teachers don't do that, but we have a process for checking temperatures. They don't do the same symptom checklist. It just doesn't make as much sense. However, our athletes do the symptoms checklist because they are out physically exerting themselves, but our students they have a temperature check. Then personal protective equipment. So we have masks available for all. If you come to campus and you forget your mask, we have many of those available. Those were provided from the state and through Ventura County Office of Education. So we have kids masks, adult masks, cloth masks, paper masks, you name it, we have it. We actually even have screens and shields. We have gloves available for everyone. We have plexiglass installation can be requested by teachers, but we have it in our offices. Some of our offices have barriers so that so you can't walk into the office, so we can limit the number of people in the office at any given time. We also are doing special education assessments. We have plexiglass installed there, and our teachers wear actually not just a full shield, but like a shield with there's a name for it, I can't remember, but a shield and a cloth drape at the bottom so that they're protected. Teacher kits should include hand sanitizer, masks, wipes, and actually a Purell spray as well that has a virus killing agent in it that you spray on and sits for 10 minutes and will kill all viruses on that surface.
So it's for surfaces, not for hands. That's
right.
What you're talking about.
Yes. We apparently got a very helpful distribution of sanitizer. I'm not sure what that is, but it is a highly alcohol-based hand sanitizer that we can't give to kids because it's not safe, but we got a ton of this stuff delivered to us that we can use for cleaning the pulse ox machine. But we're not sure, but the state sent a bunch of that out to districts and said, don't give this to kids and don't put it in classrooms. Okay.
But it's helpful and useful.
Yeah, but you could put it on tables and it would kill viruses. So we also have rules on each campus. So social distancing of 6 feet. This is really hard because people are, naturally, they naturally cluster together and talk to each other and stand next to each other. And so we're always working on, if we see groups of standing together, of reminding them to social distance, but will be and is something that is just, we will always have to have that reminder. Limited access to offices, as I mentioned, frequent restroom and common space sanitizing. This is part of our schedule that we're working on with custodians about exactly when the restrooms will be sanitized. I just had actually our custodian here came by and was showing me the great backpack and how quickly he can spray everything and clean everything. And then be on his way to sanitize the next place. Masks are required for everyone. And when we return to campus in the elementary campus, masks will be required for everyone. If there's a medical exemption, we would on a case-by-case basis look at that. And we would have to discuss with the teacher and the family what that looks like. But we do have some cases of that. And then limited after hours access to common spaces. So if we sanitize, for example, the copy room, we don't want teachers going in afterwards and using the copy machine so that it's not sanitized for the next day. So limiting those hours that staff are in common spaces outside of when it's been sanitized. Finally, other safety improvements that we've worked on, all air conditioning units are set to 50% fresh airflow. All air is replaced about every 12 minutes, depending on the size of the classroom. We removed the carpet from all the elementary classrooms. We're installing touch-free dispensers in restrooms. And then each campus has been set up with a dedicated infirmary area that is cordoned off and can be observed by a staff member, but is separated so that it wouldn't potentially spread any exposure.
And we will, I saw your, the carpet removal. We will have the new flooring in at all the elementary schools by November 2nd. It is. Okay, great.
We just didn't do portables. We did any permanent classroom, but we didn't do portables.
Okay.
Because it didn't necessarily make sense to do that. So this is our COVID action tree. This is what we would do in the case of either a confirmed diagnosis or a confirmed COVID exposure. And so you can kind of follow this flow chart. If we have a diagnosis, you could return to school or work after a release signed by a physician, or 10 days have passed since symptoms ended. If you have a confirmed COVID exposure, based on the Ventura County Public Health definition of exposure, we would basically, you have three options. You can go get a test. And if you have a negative test, then you can return to school or work. If we are waiting on your test, you quarantine. And if you have a positive test, then we go through that other piece of the flow chart.
And do we have signage about what the symptoms are that warrant this?
Yes, and those are also in your daily check-in for staff. And then finally, next steps, we are sending out a parent square message. I said tonight, I may not write a coherent message tonight. It might go out in the morning. We will start town hall meetings again once we have some information about the schedule, specific information, because that's what families will want. So we're hoping to have those the week of October 19th when we have elementary schedule, AB model, all of that a little bit closer to being complete. And then we will be working on a method for families to notify us if they're going to remain on distance learning. As I mentioned, it won't be a survey, but we will have a method for that that will be going out probably as part of the town hall meetings. That is it.
That's a lot. Is there any plan to check in with students who are absent, elementary students? You know, if they're absent, we assume that they're staying home sick, but well, I'll just leave it at that, that it's part of your flow chart there, how they come back. But with little kids, it's really hard to tell what level of sick is.
Right.
So, are there any other questions from the board?
I don't have
No,
a question.
I really appreciated that presentation. I thought that was very thorough and well thought out.
I just wanted to, this wasn't touched on tonight really, but last night during the candidates forum for school board with the Women's League of Women Voters, the League of Women Voters, sorry. One of the candidates had mentioned outside classrooms and tents, and we should have been doing that. And I just wanted to let the public know that we weren't allowed to do that, that it was against the law in the state of California to have any kind of classroom, in-person classroom going on. So just wanted to let, if you all are out there and heard that and thought, why didn't we do that? We weren't allowed to do that. So.
That is a good point though, Jane. We are actually installing tents. I think that Adam, our bond manager, and was yesterday volunteering to help set some of those up because we're all doing the best we can. And we are putting those up around campus as we speak. Maybe not right now as we speak, but in general, those are starting to go up so that we can have the ability to utilize outdoor spaces. We got a very generous grant from OEF to purchase chairs. And so at Chaparral, that looked like tables so that they could work outside. We purchased hundreds of Adirondack chairs that just, I think they arrived yesterday or they are arriving today, that will be going out to sites. We think those are really good because kids can work outside under the tents and they can move them and they can socially distance them. Tables are a little bit harder because we can't utilize all the seats at a table. And of course, if we have a table, kids are going to sit next to each other because that's what kids do. So the Adirondack chairs are actually one kid, theoretically, per chair. So we're very excited to have those and get those ready for the return to campus as well.
Thank you so much. I will agree with Kevin that that was a lot of information, well thought out, and I appreciate you presenting to us tonight.
Yeah, I'll just kick in. I don't have any specific questions other than how you guys are managing to retain your sanity as the world changes every 20 minutes. But I just want to thank you for the work.
I don't want to be left out in saying thank you. I know that this presentation is just the tip of the iceberg of the work that's been done, and very much appreciated. Thank you.
If there are no further questions or comments, we will adjourn tonight's meeting. Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being
Night,
here.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for the